Hi everybody, thanks for staying with us as we head towards lunch. So before I introduce our panelists, just to introduce the topic of this next discussion, I'm going to start with an analogy. And by the way, those that don't know me, Paul Tunnah from Healthware Group, I know my name's not on the screen. My son is football mad. He loves football. He plays football 24 hours a day. He would love to be a professional footballer for the best club in the world, which is clearly Arsenal. And he's divisive. Thank you, one fan. And he's always saying to me, how do I get to be a better footballer? Now, if I answered that question the way we've typically approached transformation in this industry, I'd probably say we need to get you a better football. Then you'll be a professional footballer. And I think what's been really healthy about the conversation today has been we've moved on. We recognize that actually the people, the way we behave, the processes are all really, really important. And that's what links into what we're talking about here. Because what he needs is coaching. And he needs coaching from somebody that knows what they're doing, which is not me. I'm not a very good footballer. And the same thing applies to our people. So our topic today is looking at within the medical teams, how do we apply coaching to improve what they're doing within this world where digital is really taking over and transforming how they're engaging? How can that have an impact on them? How can it have an impact on HCPs and patients and deliver much better outcomes? And all three of my panelists have a lot to say about this topic. So I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves and just say what their experience has been with coaching. I'm going to start with Marcus on the end there, who I think knows a little bit about coaching. So Marcus, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Marcus West, we're on the 60 Seconds exhibitor still there, you might have seen. Yeah, I've been coaching for 30 years. The people that we work with are all very long-term experienced coaches. I think, organisations that we work with where we see coaching is working really well and understood that coaching is actually something that is a combined conversation with a goal in mind as opposed to some form of correction, which I think some people can view it as. So I think we're on a bit of a journey to create a revolution around coaching so that can be a real key tenet for a successful organisation in terms of the way they develop themselves and ultimately have a greater impact on people around them.
And Marina, thank you for stepping in, by the way. I know Tamara couldn't be here.
Yes, so I'm Marina. I'm not Tamara Kochner. She couldn't make it today, so I'll try to do my best to deliver the messages as omnichannel strategies, but also as a part of the group with the medical affairs, where we actually had some coaching, training, educational content, and digital channels to try to deliver the best for the patient. So happy to be in the panel.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining me. Emma?
Hi, I'm Emma Vitalini. I'm working for Amgen as head of global medical digital strategy, not a separate strategy, but one that's trying to embed the digital capabilities across the different capabilities and product teams. My experience with coaching has been, I spent sort of some time in the last 10 years working and supporting the MSL teams and delivering centralized solutions that support that, and now expanding on that further with the implementation of technology.
Thank you very much. And as I said at the start, I mean, for the medical teams, things are getting more complex anyway. We've got more innovative therapies coming through, some amazing science that is transformative, but it doesn't make the job of communicating that any easier. Then you add in technology and digital, it gets pretty complex for them. So Marcus, speak to me about how tangibly we're seeing coaching play a role in helping them shape what they're doing.
Yeah, I think as a general observation in medical affairs, I would say that there's, this is a generalisation, that's always good to get the conversation started. I'd say there's actually a divergence between coach and coachee. I think your average MSL is not mad on the idea of being coached, even though I think subconsciously they really rather want it. And then medical managers who've often been thrust into that role of being the manager, being the coach, are often very underprepared for that role. And so what you have is this unfortunate kind of divergence of, the coach and coachee. So you're not having that really nice, constructive dialogue that you ought to be having, which is often and should be based around effective questioning and listening to each other and charting a journey. And we're seeing the MSL fraternity within an organisation becoming this massive, significant pillar for every company. And I think there's still some structural elements. And as far as I can tell, coaching is a major one that is missing. But I think people are recognising the significance of it now, and we're starting to see some initiatives being developed. And I think it's a really exciting time. I think we're on the cusp of something very exciting indeed.
Fantastic. And Marina, tell me where you've seen this applied, but also maybe pick up on the point that Mark has made around this resistance. Because if you go back to my opening analogy, most sports people love coaching. They know it's going to make them better and improve, but we do see this in the business world. It's perhaps seems a little bit, oh, I'm not sure I need that.
Actually, the need is also, and the coaching approach is also one of the battles that we have internally, is to say, like, it's really also in the context. If you are like, everyday offices, or if you have some initiatives where you get to coach or train, and then you say like, why, or I don't need it, or maybe not now in front of these people, when you actually get out of the context sometimes, and we did it actually with the medical affairs at Servier, we did some kind of learning expeditions context, where it was easier and like kind of more relaxed and open to having some advices or experience sharing for also out of the pharma or medical specialties in other companies than pharma. And we had this amazing experience with the Facebook health guys or Google health guy, and it was like less in competition, or I want to be like in the middle of, the more mind open, and then having this opportunity to then have being coached, but in a different approach, I guess, could be one of the options that we tried.
Yeah, so kind of triggering that competitive instinct, almost gamifying coaching, I guess, in a way.
Yeah.
Have you seen something similar, Emma?
Yes, and I think some of the challenges always that historically we haven't put as much emphasis on it in medical affairs. So whereas there's really robust structure and guidance and dedicated field directors in the sales sort of function, on the medical side, it is that medical manager that's often sort of office-based and usually, not an MSL or field experience, essentially. And, they haven't also been coached themselves. So we miss some of that emphasis and that explicit attention that's paid in the commercial side. And I think as a result, people don't appreciate the value that it brings always.
So we're trying to break that cycle of, well, I never got coaching, so you don't really need it. But what kind of feedback, when you see this coming into play, what kind of feedback do you get from the teams? I guess some are a little bit more reluctant, some are more receptive.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously focus pretty heavily around communication skills. One thing that we've seen a lot of is that medical exchange models and associated competencies are beginning to be, I guess, coached in to organisations. One of the big problems that we've noticed is that some suppliers have essentially taken the sales model from the commercial side and removed the S word and handed it over to medical. And medical have kind of looked at this and gone, well, that looks quite like a sales model to me with the S word taken out. So I think there needs to be more of an imaginative approach. We've done a lot of stuff on medical storytelling and really trying to set the bar high. I mean, the principles are still the same of, take them on a journey, educate them, be engaging, all those kind of good things. And I think there's a lot of potential, but I think the framework and the kind of definition, especially of the medical manager, for me, needs to be more clearly defined. A sales manager, it's simple. They've got a very defined piece of information that they're dealing with and sales skills. That's it. But of course, in medical, a medical manager is not often going to give that really detailed feedback on content because they're not the chief medical officer or the sort of person who has the seniority or the knowledge to do so. So I think clearly defining this is where my role as coach is going to start and finish. And bear in mind, we've consulted to many, many medical affairs teams, and not once have I seen the same definition of what a medical manager is. So I think that's still kind of finding its feet as well. But I think if everybody knows where their job starts and finishes, well, that's a great starting point, because then everyone's kind of understanding of what their role is a little bit more, and I think that can only deliver more positive results in the long run.
I guess it's like a lot of things, and that resistance that you described there, where it's like, well, this was a commercial thing, Now you're bringing it across the medical. I've seen that in a number of areas, and you've probably seen this as well. People need to feel it's kind of tailored for them. It's designed for medical. It's engineered to make them be more successful. So again, Marina, Emma, I'd love to hear your kind of feedback that you've seen on this.
I guess one of the key points from what you just mentioned is also to obviously be clear on what the scope is and the value bringing. And the medical is key, obviously, in what we're doing. And then to give some keys to empower them. Because then they actually adapt, take it as their own, and then be able to say that I'm part of it. It's not just like some new, trendy, whatever, or change the role, as we were told earlier by Carlos. It's basically to say either, yes, I need, and for that I need to be coached, I need to have the tools, I need some of the content, but the whole process is to empower the medical teams to take them as their own, and by design, to deliver what they're actually doing, the medical education, be part of the whole products and content in the portfolio, and the services as, let's say, digital apps or digital solutions or tech solutions to kind of amplify everything.
Anything you wanted to add to that?
I would agree. I mean, as Carlos mentioned before, it's about anchoring around that single strategy, because otherwise you're asking the MSLs to sort of deliver a medical strategy, but also be aligned with their key account sort of management strategy. So I think having that, I think also focusing on the patient is really important, because then you're showing the MSL what they're actually delivering in terms of value. And also that creates the greater value for the team when you close the loop and it comes back, because you get the insights and the information that are feeding back directly on what you're trying to achieve, rather than on multiple different things.
Yeah, and that patient focus is something that we all keep in our minds in all of the work that we do. So I think that the context there is that, good coaching that helps medical teams do a better job will have an impact for the HCPs and the patients. But also some of that might carry across to how they engage with the HCPs and patients and have a more direct impact. So I wonder if that's something that you've seen at play. Do you want to pick up on that, Emma?
Yeah, I absolutely. And I think, there are great opportunities to talk a little bit about technology that we can use now. So with MSLs, often there is that career challenge that they don't feel that there is the opportunity for progression or acknowledgement. And I think that technology can also enable this now. So we struggled for some time on how can we enable really good MSL coaches to be coaches for other individuals across other countries. And, there's always the language barrier, because then you have to go to the common denominator, which is often English, but people can't necessarily express themselves in the way they would in their own language. So, I think that the technology component now with simultaneous translation or, translation of a recording enables people to coach each other where there is not necessarily a common language. And I think that can help. And then we can really start to focus on the content piece, because you've got the coaching part covered.
Yeah, Marina, I know in some of your work, just to build on that, that coaching process and thought process is intrinsic in how you engage with HCPs and patients as well, isn't it?
The point was, when we were earlier today, we were discussing that it's not anymore like a B2B, B2C kind of approach, and having the patient and the coaching through the patient journey. As I would actually use some of the indirect way of doing. We use like a partnership with the startup called Delphi, where basically it's focused on the patient, but all around is actually allowed like the MSLs and the field forces to empower them with the communication lines, but as a very concrete tool to accompany the patients, and also valuable data and content for the HCPs. So it's like an all-in-one tool to actually help coaching through something very pragmatic, being here a digital app. But basically the whole approach was not as a tech focus, but actually first patient, in patient information to support the HCP needs and focus on the patient through the messages that we can deliver on the app and around the services on it. So that was one of the examples we had at Servier.
Which is something we heard in one of the presentations earlier today, was that focus on the problem and what's needed, and think about how technology fits into that, not the other way around. Marcus, I'll come back to you on this, because I know you do a lot of work directly with the medical teams, but that kind of onward impact on HCPs and patients, is that something that you've seen?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the biggest, I guess, area of need that is constantly repeated to us is that MSLs talk too much. I believe the expression is data dump. So that's a very common issue that's raised. And I think it's even more common now because people are, I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day about newspaper subscriptions, and I was saying, well, my newspaper subscription is pretty much my iPhone, which just pulses, little news spurts at me all day. And I think people are tilting towards short and sharp, Twitter, a limited amount of characters, or X is now called. So, I really feel this idea that, people speaking for 15 minutes straight about really technical information, it's just not gonna cut it unless you've got somebody who's got a huge brain, which is possible, and an incredible attention span as well. But so I guess that idea, how do we take those little sort of nuggets of information and I guess to dangle them in conversation a little bit more? And a big part of that I'm not seeing enough of is, you've got these people with a real level of excellence in scientific knowledge in the MSL team. Some of them are performing at an outstanding level in relation to that, being more succinct. The ability to share that best practice, I'd like to see a lot more of that happening.
Yeah.
Because really inexperienced MSLs can, be made a lot more ready for those peer-to-peer conversations by learning from people who've, got that experience and really value the spoken word.
Yeah. Keeping an eye on time, and we're in the last few minutes. By the way, you can't miss this clock. It's massive. Has anybody in the audience got a burning question they want to ask our panel while they're here? 3 people that are living and breathing coaching. Any questions? I'm not seeing any hands.
Well, someone's maybe brave. Can I comment on what you were just saying and what we were talking about earlier? So one of the other components is coaching isn't necessarily just the long-term kind of coaching and the capabilities, but it can be your buddy. And so as we went back to the generative AI conversation earlier, that cockpit or that kind of assistant that can help suggest based on, what potentially institutionally is happening, so how other MSLs are responding to this, or what trending topics are coming up in discussion that can prompt and be your coach kind of there and then to prepare you just as you go in. I think that's also a key opportunity for the future.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think one thing I wanted to touch on maybe in the sort of last couple of minutes or so is sometimes people maybe think training and coaching is the same thing. And of course it's not. They're 2 very different elements. So I'd love to capture thoughts from each of you. What you think is, what is the difference first of all? And what is key to good coaching as you've seen it? Marcus, do you want to go first on this?
Yeah, look, I mean, that's a massive topic of conversation in and of itself. But I would say the big thing about coaching that differs from training is that I think it's more occasional and at the point of need, and that's when the most effective coaching happens. You were talking before about your son being obsessed with soccer, and I've got a daughter that's very good at netball, and we were told by a sports psychologist the worst time that you can give a child, or anybody frankly, feedback on what they've done is immediately afterwards. So the drive home in the car, picking apart, how poorly she played and where she could have improved is exactly the wrong thing to do. So I think for coaching, it's the same idea. When's the best time to have this conversation? And hopefully you can get it to a point where somebody will actually come forward to you and ask the question and kind of open that coaching conversation.
Yeah. Marina?
Actually, I was thinking about like the sport, like uncovered, and that maybe it's like the coaching before going on stage, or the coaching because like what is the big event. And actually, I agree that right after is obviously not the best case, but also like the time in the preparation, the coaching, like the long term, just to make sure you kind of diffuse some of the key elements that then when it's going to be needed, you actually like at the right moment to deliver it and to do it.
Yeah, it's kind of how you do it as much as
yes, absolutely.
Emma?
I think everything really they said, and I see the training is like you're leveling someone up, so you're giving them a specific skill, whereas the coaching, you're helping them to be successful in actually implementation of that.
Yeah. And I think to come back to what you said, Marcus, with my 11-year-old son, I'm almost a teenager, I think the worst time I can give him advice is when I'm speaking. It can be a little bit tricky, but I'm not great at the football. I'm not best placed. But I mean, just to round off our conversation, I think for me, what's been really good about this event and the general dialogue is hearing that shift towards the people and the process and how do we take people on that journey. And I think, all we've been discussing about coaching is really, really key to that, whether it's medical, commercial, whatever it may be. So wishing you all continued success. And I think we are starting to see some real progress. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.